nature of being human in this reality is messy. And there's nothing wrong with that.
I'm Heather Grzych, and this is the Wisdom of the Body podcast. This podcast explores the idea of body intelligence as the real key to learning the knowledge of life, or what we call Ayurveda in the ancient language of Sanskrit. We do that by connecting with today's creative leaders and experts who will help you listen to your body, trust your gut, and live in deeper harmony with nature. Come join me as we unlock the golden door to clear, direct perception and become very deep listeners. You can find the Wisdom of the Body podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Stitcher. You can also follow us by joining my email at heathergrzych.com or on Instagram at heathergrzych. I know you're going to love this podcast, so take a second right now to subscribe. Today, I'm here with Scott Stabile. Scott is the author of Enough as You Are and Big Love, The Power of Living with a Wide Open Heart. And he's a passionate love advocate. He believes that there's no force more powerful than love to create a real connection and healing in our world. And he guides transformational breathwork journeys and also leads personal empowerment workshops internationally. And his inspirational posts have attracted a huge and devoted social media following, including more than 350,000 Facebook fans. Scott, I am so thrilled to meet you today.
Hey, thank you so much, Heather. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, it's nice to be connecting with you across half the country. We have half the country between us right now, and seeing your face is lovely. Today, Scott and I are going to talk about how people can refresh their relationships to themselves and to others in 2024, because relationships are everything. And Scott has written this beautiful book, several books, but this really cool book that is organized in a very specific way, which I'll let him talk about, and really makes you think about your relationship to yourself and to others around you. So whether you live in a house or an apartment or in a certain environment, or whether you're thinking about the city and where you live, there are people that you have relationships with in your environment, or the places where you work, you have relationships there. And there are a lot of statistics that are telling us that people are less engaged than they have been in the past. Because one example, the Gallup organization has been tracking employee engagement for a lot of years, and that's actually been declining since 2020. So I guess organizations report that only 1/3 of the employees are actually engaged or considered engaged. I don't know what the rest of them are doing, just, on social media while they're in meetings or something. And also that marriage and divorce rates for women are down. So women are getting divorced less. Okay. So maybe does that mean more connection? I don't know. But they're also getting married less. Obviously, that doesn't reflect people being in relationships where there's not a marriage, because there's a lot of those now. But the last statistic I want to throw out at people, just to sort of drive home this point that people may be less engaged than they've been in the past and less connected than they've been in the past, is that 3 in 10 Americans are single, and only about half of those people are actually open to dating. So it kind of seems like a lot of people like being alone. And I don't have any statistics on friendships, but because so much was disrupted in the pandemic, to me, it seems that people really have to work hard to form relationships with people because of how all those networks have been broken. Then there's war, and let's not even get into that. But maybe we can figure out some ways in this conversation, that some tools and some ideas that people can use so that they can connect better with people in 2024. How's that sound, Scott?
I mean, all of that sounds great. And honestly, what you're saying centers me in really the message of the book, which is let's get in better relationship with ourselves first and foremost. Because one, it's going to inform how we show up for every relationship in our lives, but especially given some of the numbers that you just shared, some of the statistics. And if I just look at certain friends of mine, I know a lot of single friends who actually want to be in relationships. It's what they're wanting. So what I'm seeing, not just in my circle of people, but in the world in general, is a lot of loneliness. And what helps, I mean, self-love helps everything, right? Like how we come into relationship with ourselves is going to serve every aspect of our lives. But absolutely, if you're spending a lot of time on your own, and we're always spending 24/7 with ourselves and with our thoughts and our being, we are served by committing to ourselves through the lens of love and compassion and grace. Like it will always serve us, it will always benefit us, and it stands to transform our lives.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm sort of curious. You write a lot about love and loving and being loving. And was that ever a problem for you to love people in the past?
When I reflect back on the kid I was a really compassionate kid. I was always a pretty loving spirit. So it wasn't necessarily hard for me to connect with people in that way. I wouldn't say I was ever kind of shut down to those possibilities with people. But what I will say to that is I was certainly shut down to that way of being with myself in many ways, especially as I grew older and started to internalize the levels of conditioning that we all internalize. And I'm a gay man, so internalizing a whole world of shame around sexuality and believing I was less than because of it and a sinner because of it and a pervert because of it. That's just one other element to all of the conditioning that we receive that tells us in some way we are not okay. Because how we are conditioned, whether it's from our parents or caregivers, whoever raised us, or our governments or our churches, the PR firms, with the beauty billboards, we're being told how we're supposed to look, what we're supposed to do, how we're supposed to think, who we're supposed to love. And no one can fit into that box of conditioning in a way that is authentic. It's not possible. And we try so hard. I'm speaking generally, but I feel like I can speak for most of us because this is a lived human experience, at least in this country, certainly. We try so hard to fit in. We long to fit in. We long to be a part of the in crowd and to be loved and liked and all of that. And what we do is we just end up hurting ourselves, really shutting off whole aspects of ourselves that are actually what is most authentically who we are. And so part of this journey for me in life, and I think it's a lifelong journey, has just been about looking at how I'm showing up and really bringing awareness to whether or not I am speaking, thinking, acting out of my conditioned responses or out of a more authentic response. And when I do that, anytime I can nudge myself into the field of authenticity, I know that I'm setting myself up for more meaningful connections and situations and possibilities. Like that's what happens when we honor what is most true within us. And what I learned, this is a long answer. Is this okay? You can interrupt
I
me at any
love it.
time.
Keep
Okay. All
going.
right, cool. What I've learned is that this was a really beautiful moment of understanding for me. And this was years ago. And it started as one of these like heavy, oh my God, I can't believe it. But it was like really recognizing no matter what you do, you are going to be judged by some people.
Mm.
Like there is no way around judgment. And when that realization came to me, it felt really heavy and dark. Like, why are we so judgmental with one another? But then I'm like, wait a minute, that is the most liberating understanding I've had in a long time, because whether I choose to live in this box of conditioning or I choose to live in the expansiveness of my authenticity and my freedom, I'm going to be judged. So knowing that, why would I ever choose this box? Right? Like I'm going to be judged, yes, for being free, but I would have been judged otherwise, but I won't get all the benefits that come with being in the freedom.
How did you realize that? Because obviously, for anybody who's a people pleaser or whatever thing we do in order to get positive feedback or validation from the environment, how did you discover that you would be judged no matter what? How did this realization come to you?
Because I was getting judged no matter
Oh.
what, because it's like, I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm trying to do what I'm supposed to quote unquote be doing. And there's still some people who are not responding to this presentation of me in a good way.
Mm.
So why continue to give my energy? I mean, I can use sexuality, of course, as an example of that in a big way, like trying to mold myself into the straight guy and then recognizing when I came out, the liberation, the sense of freedom, the sense of joy. And it's like those were all profound gifts to that coming out process. And that's just one specific example, but anyone listening, you could apply that type of example to anything in your life, like any area in your life where you are trying to contort yourself into the expectations or conditioning of others, and then having moved beyond it and just saying, I'm done. I'm just going to be free in this way. I'm not going to pretend I'm this when I'm really this. And then there's one of the pieces in the book, it starts off like, actually, I shouldn't even brought it up because now I can't remember any of it, but it's essentially like, if you're not willing to be yourself, how can you truly love yourself? Who is it you're trying to love? Like, so many of us are working hard at self-love, and yet we're not even willing to present who we truly are, right? And when you're willing to be who you truly are, the people who are responding to you are responding to your truth. And those are the people you want in your life, right? When you're hiding, the people who are responding to you are responding to an image of you that is somewhat false. So these are the relationships you're creating. They're being built on falseness. And look, we all do this to some degree. And I write a lot about authenticity and talk a lot about it. I'm not always authentic. Sometimes it's easier just to like go along with whatever's happening, and not like stand clearly in my truth. Not when it really matters necessarily, but in general in life, sometimes it's just easier to take that path, and that's human. And part of self-love for me is really acknowledging that our humanity is everything. It is the fullness of everything we do here. And when I'm not able to show up for myself in what I might consider the healthiest way or the most aligned way, I can still love myself. I can still acknowledge, hey, it's okay. You're human. Maybe next time. But I'm not going to shame myself the way I used to. I'm not going to judge myself the way I used to for not showing up as this more evolved person, because all that ultimately created was much more suffering. So
Mm.
now I'm much more graceful with myself, much more gentle, much more willing to say, I love you, baby. It's okay. You
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote failed. It's okay. You got rejected. It's okay. You got judged. It's okay. You're still beautiful. You're still worthy. You're still enough. And when we can do that for ourselves, when we can be that voice, the way we're able to show up in the world changes profoundly, because we know that no matter how we step forward, we've got our back on the other side of it. So if I try something and fall on my face, on the other side of that, rather than shaming myself for that, I'm going to be cheering myself on. If I take a chance to make a change in my life and it doesn't go as planned, instead of shaming, I'm going to be like, hey, good for you. You're still worthy. And so it allows us to take more risks and make more changes and step into our lives in a braver way when we're our best friend.
Mm. Yeah, because it takes a lot of energy. One of the words that is coming up for me is like suppression of something. And if you're always trying to suppress whatever impulses or thoughts or emotions or whatever are arising, that just takes so much energy that oftentimes you can't even be present with the people that you're with, even. And then it does seem that once you let go of those, I don't know, controls, there's this risk that you're going to look like you're a mess in the process. But it almost is like a necessity to like understand the dial of control on the self, because yeah.
I think absolutely. And Heather, everyone's a mess. Literally, do you know anyone who is not to some degree a mess? Like, the nature of being human in this reality is messy, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's for me the beauty of really, really kind of steeping yourself in this understanding that everything you think, everything you speak, everything you feel, it's all part of being human. It's all just part of it. Can we look at it through that lens instead of feeling this compulsive need to judge and condemn everything we do? I was on this path of enlightenment for years in my life where the only thing that mattered to me was getting enlightened. And I had a guru and I was in a cult, and all I was thinking about was like, I'm going to be enlightened someday. And what I was constantly doing was judging myself against this fictionalized, enlightened version of myself that did not exist. And I was miserable in that judgment because it was always like, why am I not where I want to be instead of just being with where I am in a loving, accepting way, right? It's like, it's less about, I think it's much more often about the way our mind is judging where we are and how we are than actually how we are and where we are that's creating the suffering. It's all the judgment of it.
So funny because the little debate that you and I were having before we started recording today about whether or not you were a poet, because I'm like, you're a poet, and I feel like that's a very, I don't want to even say thinking, but I guess it's thinking, where it's judgmental versus more observing. And like the sort of inclination that we have as humans to want to understand black and white things, like this is good and this is bad, rather than just being in like direct perception of
Yeah.
something and noticing how temperature changes and how things move. And to me, that's a very poetic way of, at least when things are communicated that way, it's very poetic. And I guess I'm a little bit obsessed with this right now because your book is written to me in poetic ways. And I'm kind of fascinated by it because I studied Ayurvedic medicine, which the medical texts are actually written in poems, in poetic verse. So when, a lot of medical professionals, they start to feel like there's something missing in their processing of their relationships with their patients or the way that they're able to even understand what's going on with someone. And I've always felt that because those books were written in poems, it just allows us to see something a little bit different that I feel
Mm-hmm.
you can convey in your book very succinctly because you're using language which feels more energetically connected to the heart.
Yeah. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, thank you. And I love that you referred to me as a poet. It isn't ever anything I think of myself as, and that is truly my own insecurity. When I think of, I don't know if you're familiar with the poet Andrea Gibson as an
No, I'm
example. If not, get familiar with her. She's brilliant. Like, I'm like, she's a poet, right? And it's just this mental ego nonsense of comparison and insecurity. But I appreciate what you're saying. I like that. And I think it's beautiful that those texts are written. I didn't know that they were written in poetic verses.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Rumi can say something differently than a textbook can.
Yeah, of course. I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah. So, from your book, this latest book, I pulled out some of the pages that I especially liked. Yeah. So, I wanted to see one, if I could just like read off some of those, and then maybe if you could read a little bit as well.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay, cool. I think you actually addressed this earlier, but it's, I think, very, very, very important. I don't remember which page it's on. Don't waste your time explaining yourself to those determined to misunderstand you. That made me feel so sad. And I felt so many things reading that. I feel like you've already addressed some of it, but what else in that can we really learn from?
I think just that, like, we're not here to explain who we are to people, especially those who are committed to misunderstanding who we are. And I think if you reflect on social media, even for a minute, you're likely to see that that is happening continuously on there, where people are sharing something that they're writing, and you can see in the comments, maybe others are interpreting it in a very specific way, and oftentimes not doing it very graciously, and then coming back at them. And you can feel, for me, Heather, everything here is energy. So it tends to be very clear to me if I'm in conversation with someone who is genuinely open to learning about me and to hearing my perspective if we're talking about something specifically, or if they're determined to take my words and use them against me in a way that serves whatever it is they feel the need to convey and be right about. And I've been on both sides of that. I've been the person determined to misunderstand people as well, by the way. Anything I write in this book like that, I'm on both sides. I've been on both sides of it, certainly.
Mm.
But, you spoke earlier about wasting energy, like on repression or how much energy it takes. And for me, this is another example of trying to dialogue with someone who is not really interested in an open dialogue, an open conversation. It's not where I want to put my energy. And it's not where I would encourage anyone to put their energy. It doesn't go anywhere. And all you end up feeling is frustrated and unseen and judged. And look, that's part of life. And we're going to experience that throughout our lives, but we don't have to give our energy to it. And when you stop doing so, it's more liberation in your life. It's more freedom. It's more room to breathe.
How do you think we can spot that? What are some tells when you know another person is doing that? And then is it just immediately stop talking? Like, how do you redirect there? Like, first, how do you notice it? And then how do you redirect it?
I guess it depends. I'd like to think that if it's with friends of mine, loved ones, people I want to be in my life and am choosing to be in my life, that their intention isn't going to do that in general with me. But if it's coming up in that context, I think I'd be more inclined to just be like upfront, like, wait a minute, I feel like you're trying to pin me in a corner or something. If it's at a party and you're talking to someone, or if it's on social media, and someone's coming at me, I don't engage with it. I'm not interested in engaging. And how do I sense it? It's energy. It's a feeling. It's what happens in my body. There's a difference for me when someone is calling me on my shit and it's my friend. That's not going to feel good. But there's a difference in a friend saying, hey, you've kind of been acting like a jerk and I want to make you aware of this. That's very different. It doesn't feel good, but I don't feel like they're trying to tear me down just for the sake of doing so, versus someone who's just combative and their energy is just coming at you. So I'm going to be inclined in those situations to extract myself or just to change the subject.
Yeah.
I don't want to waste my time and energy on that. It's not fun. It feels gross.
Yeah. And it just feels like it would take so much energy to even try to get a person, when that happens, see something differently. And you can't make them because they have to go through their own experience of learning something to develop a new paradigm in their own sense of self.
Absolutely. I know how hard it is for me to see things differently as someone who's pretty open, like more open than a lot of people I meet. So yeah, expecting that of others in the moment, it's unrealistic. To that, I would say, if you are engaging with someone who is really open and you're having alternative views about something and you're able to share how you feel and ask questions about how they feel, that is a really good feeling. That is a really good experience. And we could use a whole lot more of that type of dialogue in our world.
Yeah, thank you. Can you read one of the poems? Can you read the poem? Well, I'm sorry, I'm calling it a poem. It's a
You can
poem.
call it a poem. That's all right. Yeah.
How do you refer to it? Just curious.
I say the book is described as short prose and poetry.
Yeah. Okay.
So a blend of both. But you call them poems. I'm vibing on it.
It feels like a poem to me. So on page 24, it starts with, "It's not the pain." Could you read that one?
I'd love to. It's not the pain, but your ability to be with the pain that changes, that shifts over time. You grow larger than what debilitates, until the mighty boulder crushing your heart becomes a single stone resting upon your chest. The pain remains, real and even heavy at times, but no longer suffocating, no longer the only story. You have expanded too far, a universe all your own, to stay oppressed by its weight.
Wow. I feel like that just described like every healing journey anyone's ever been on. Well, because people want to know if they've been through something or if they've been experiencing something for a long time. They want to know, is this ever going to go away? Is this ever really going to feel better? And I think about it a lot from a health perspective. But I mean, if you have an emotion, there's a physical response to that. right? So I'm thinking a lot even about this boulder on the chest. Oh my God. Ouch. Turning a boulder into a stone and taking that weight off. The boulder on the chest feeling specifically, do you think that one is fear? What is that particular emotion?
It could be many things depending on the circumstance. I mean, if you just lost a loved one, it could just be grief, like deep, deep, deep sorrow and grief, right? If you're moving into a change in your life that is terrifying, that could be a boulder of fear, fear of the unknown, right? So it could be anything. For me, it's how we experience what we're going through that allows the boulder to shift into a stone. And to what you said earlier, also, I think everything changes. Like when I am most in despair and when I feel like all the tools I have in my tool belt are not working and I am completely lost in the insanity or fear of my mind, the mantra I hold on to, which is perhaps one of the most famous, is "This too shall pass," because it always does. And when I'm in it, my mind wants to tell me it's not going to, and it's going to last forever. It's a little different, I think, with physical pain because that could feel different. Because depending on how the person is with their pain, depending the degree of the pain or what it is they're dealing with, you don't know that that's going to pass. It
Mhm.
might just continue to get worse, right? For me, with emotional pain in my lived experience, it's like it always shifts. It always changes. Every time I thought I would never get to the other side of a bout of depression or whatever, it's like I always do. And I think it's so important to remember that. And that's what those words, "this too shall pass," really center me in, is this knowing it's like it always changes. You will not be here forever.
Well, I was just wondering if it has something also to do with when we get hyper focused on something here that we're feeling is bad, and then like the percentage of our awareness that focuses on that versus like all of the other amazing, beautiful things that don't feel bad in life.
100%. That's so much of it. And even the words we choose to use around what we're experiencing, the way we choose to define what we're experiencing, right? Like if I'm grieving, I'm grieving. Now I can place a judgment on that as it's the worst thing in the world, or I could look at it through this lens of, oh my God, it's incredibly painful and incredibly hard. And also a reflection of how much I loved the person that I'm grieving, right? Like we can use language in a different way. We can bring to the experience a more expansive understanding, So yeah, it's exactly what you said.
Yeah. Yeah, because life is full of difficult things, and just I'm going to knock on wood. I don't feel like I've had anything like super crazy happen for a long time, and just knocking because it's like,
I'm
you know,
knocking
it's going
for
to
you
come.
and
Someone
me.
close to you is, going to pass, or you're going to have an illness or something, or you're going to lose a house or something. Something horrible is going to happen, and you don't know when it's going to happen. But I think in all these moments where there's something horrible happening, there's also a lot of amazing things. And that can be weird for people to even sit with, because thinking about like black and white, ways of being, shouldn't I be all crappy or all good? Like it's okay to be both crappy and good at the same
Uh-huh.
time. Whoa.
Uh-huh. I'm listening to you, and there's a piece of writing that speaks to this, but I don't know where it is in the book, so maybe it'll come up because it really speaks to this idea that I love the word expansiveness. Like
Mm.
I am continuously reminding myself when I see that I am really mired in one way of viewing something, and that way of viewing something is keeping me locked in this sense of dread or misery or anxiety or whatever else. It's always an invitation to expand my perspective and not to deny the pain of that thing, but just to remember that along with that, there is a world of beauty and love and compassion here as well. So there's always the opportunity to seek out those aspects of what it means to be human in this reality too. And we serve ourselves by doing so.
Mm. Yeah. Rumi's like the cure for the pain is in the pain, but sometimes the cure for the pain is also expanding beyond the pain, which is interesting because I think that's a tactic that's used, being a yoga therapist in the past to deal with physical pain, even, just take the awareness away from it.
Absolutely. I found the piece. If you
Oh, good. Yeah, read it, read it, read
is
it.
it okay?
I
Okay.
was trying to find it, actually. That's why I was.
All right. It's one thing to acknowledge how difficult life can be, but it's another to focus on it, to talk about everything that feels wrong all the time, to act like there is only darkness and misery here. In our compulsion not to deny the harsh realities of this unpredictable existence, we often end up denying life's extraordinary beauty. We focus our gaze on division and blind ourselves to real connection. We seek out examples of brutality and ignore the many moments of kindness. We bind ourselves to the opinions of others and silence the deep wisdom of our hearts. In our effort to avoid spiritual bypassing, we pass right by the endless exhibits of love on this planet, within this humanity, from one to another and another to one. There is so much hardship, yes, too much, and there is so much beauty too. Where are you looking, and what are you looking for?
Mm,
It kind of speaks to what we were talking about.
it really does. Yeah. And it's just, things are so much more multidimensional than we want them to be because we think it's simpler to not pay attention to everything. But there's one other that I wanted to bring up with you that I thought was really profound. And because I know so many, and a lot of my clients are very smart, very heady people, but anybody who has a brain is really at risk of being this way, even if you're not, like a Mensa member.
Uh-huh.
It's like anybody with a brain is at risk of using their brain too much on things. But there's one piece where you said, maybe your mind's plan needs your heart's revision.
Yeah. You want me to talk about it?
Yeah, I do. How do we do that? How do we get the heart's revision?
Well, look, I don't know who said it first, but it's said often. Every time I want to bring up something, I end up butchering it. Like I lose what it is. But
Me too.
it's like the mind is a beautiful servant, but a terrible master, which is essentially like let your heart lead. And, as I progress through my life, I really look, we're all in our minds a lot of the time, and we're all being led by our thoughts and by our minds a lot of the time. But really, 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 like when I'm evaluating important decisions, it's going to be about what is my heart saying? What is my body saying? Not just my heart, but the physicality of my body. If I have a list of 30 pros and one con about a decision I'm going to step into, but every time I think of that decision, like my shoulders hunch and I get all kind of closed down, that is all the information I need. The body is very, very clear in that moment that this is a no, even if my mind is listing all the reasons why it's a yes. And we are so conditioned to just believe all of our thoughts and believe that our mind is making sense and knows what's right. And we're not in any way taught to listen to other aspects of who we are, when in fact, those other aspects are so much more often aligned with what is most true and necessary for us. So that's really all that's about. And especially when we find that our thoughts are taking us down a path that is creating for us more misery, more disconnection, more anxiety. Well, what does your heart have to say about that? What does your body have to say about that? What does love have to say about that? Let's invite these voices in and see how we can be led from these places instead of just mental processes.
That's so beautiful. And I'm literally, as you're talking about the pros and cons list, I'm remembering these points in my own life where I would create these spreadsheets when making a big decision. And then
Sure.
I'm sure anybody can relate to this, getting stuck in analysis paralysis. And then you're like, I don't know what to do. And oh, if you could just sit and pay attention to your body for a minute and ask yourself the same question. Holy crap, it's like a decision comes so much faster.
Yeah.
It's insane.
We don't learn that. We don't learn to do that. It's insane how much we don't learn that would benefit us. We don't learn to love ourselves.
Mm.
We're conditioned against loving ourselves. It's so insane. I wish there were a self-love class from like first grade on.
Mm.
all through school, we'd have a very different world if people actually understood the importance of treating themselves with love and compassion, and how naturally that extends to how we treat other people and our planet and everything.
Yeah. And I feel like the yogis and the sort of different wisdom traditions have really, hence why you ended up in a cult, you know, hence why, I mean, I wasn't necessarily in a cult, but I went deep into the, Vedic lineages. And when I was in Ayurveda school, my dad actually thought I was in a cult. So I kind of get that. And there are ways that people reconnect with themselves in order to reorient their connection with the world. And it does seem that even something simple like religion could do that for some people. But then again, religion can also be like set forth in this very black and white way
Sure.
in how it's practiced. So even if it's a religious sort of practice that you're following to connect back in, whatever you do to connect back in is the goal, to connect back to everything in the right relationship.
Yes, absolutely. I would describe it as a source energy. There is an energy that is in all things. It's in the mountains, it's in the flowers, it's in the oceans, it's in the planets, it's in the cosmos. And so naturally, that same energy is within us. And for me, that energy offers divine wisdom, creativity. It's ever abundant, it's without bounds, it's wildly creative. And we have access to that. But that access gets buried beneath a lifetime of conditioning and trauma and expectation and a whole host of other things, right? It's why you see these liberated children who are wildly creative running around and dressing up and just being free. And then with adults, not so much. It starts to get shuttered slowly, 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 but it doesn't ever leave. That's the thing that excites me. Like when people say to me they don't know how to love themselves and they've never been able to, it's like, okay, here we are right now, though. That was the story of your past up until this point. It is always only what we do from this moment on that will matter the most. And the beauty of that is we're given this moment in every new moment, which means it's never too late to transform the relationship you have with yourself. Never. And my excitement lives in that knowing it can't be too late. If you're here and you're breathing, you're in relationship with yourself. So what would you like to see? How would you like it to be different? How would you like it to shift? Are you willing to love yourself? Are you committed? With willingness and commitment and practice, I really believe in terms of self-love, all is possible. I see self-love as a skill, which for me means like any skill, the more you practice it, the better you become. It becomes more natural. It's more ingrained. I have a very self-abusive mind like everyone. And yet what's different for me in my life now is I don't live on that wheel of self-abuse nearly as long. Like I'm aware, oh, wait, my mind is tearing me down. Nope, that doesn't fly. And I'm like, hey, honey, you're beautiful. And my relationship with my mind has changed profoundly. And I hope it continues to change even more profoundly, but it's like, I am better at bearing witness to my thoughts. I'm better at being in the audience to the movie that's playing in my mind, being the sky, letting my thoughts be the weather, whatever metaphor you want to use for it. Remember that you are not your thoughts. You have never been and you never will be. Your mind is like any other human mind on the planet, thinking a whole host of insane shit rooted in fear and insecurity and conditioning. And that is the experience for everyone. And the moment you define yourself by those thoughts is the moment you're going to create for yourself misery. But every time you remember that that's just my mind being a mind, right? Like if you can bring curiosity to it, and I'm getting better at just bringing a nonchalance to it. Like when my mind's doing its insane dance, be like, whoa, that is a trip, instead of like, I'm a piece of crap. I'm a piece of crap. It's like, whoa,
Mm-hmm.
look at my mind right now trying to tear me down. It is creative. And if you can bring that kind of energy, it energetically shifts what's happening in the moment to this moment of despair and suffering to one of like, you can kind of giggle the way you just giggled. And this is one of the ways we can play with our relationship to ourselves. This is one of the ways we can love ourselves, by remembering to witness our mind instead of becoming it.
Yeah, that's so cool. Because I have who's almost 7. You can already start to see how the mind moves, away from direct perception with beings, even at that young age, whether it's, misremembering something, or because you brought up the word creativity. It's that creative aspect of the mind that we love that makes us be able to write stories and, create art and stuff like that. But that's like that same mechanism is also taking us away from direct perception sometimes. So I literally was lecturing my kid last night saying, your mind is creative. It's going to move. It's going to go away from what you're seeing right now, and it's going to do its own thing. But you need to know when it's doing that.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. It's hard though.
It's really hard. That's the thing. I'm talking about witnessing the mind in this very, like, matter of fact, yeah, just witness your mind and don't become your thoughts. It's not easy. And I have not mastered it. And every time I remember to do it, to live in that energy, it shifts what's going on in the moment in a positive way. It is within our power to do it. And with practice, it becomes more natural.
Yeah, practice. So, last question, the question I ask every guest on the show. What does the wisdom of the body mean to you?
It means a lot. As I mentioned earlier, like, I'm getting better in my life at tuning into my body for answers instead of just relying on my thoughts. Though I have to say, in the past years, I've seen a lot of versions of this statement, like the body doesn't lie. And that is not my experience of the body. Sometimes the body does. Sometimes trauma response in the body is going to show up in a way that it's not receiving a situation accurately. It's being triggered in some way based on a past experience, not on what's in front of you. So I think it's important to recognize sometimes the body it's not intentionally lying, of course, but it's not in line with what is true in the moment. But most of the time, your body is giving you so much information, and so quickly and so clearly. Like, if we do what you said earlier, just ask it. Do your spreadsheets and make your list, sure. And then just check in with your body. Like, what do you think about this new job? And see what happens in your body. Like, hold yourself open to that. You're likely to get a response that's going to tell you if it's a pro or a con. And I could be much more tuned into my body than I am, but I believe deeply in the wisdom of our bodies.
Super cool. Yeah. No one's actually brought that part up before, about the fact that the body can be wrong. And yeah, I think that happens because of how things have gotten programmed, how things have been processed. And yeah, like trauma lives in your body. And also sometimes we have things that aren't connecting up right physically that can block, cellular intelligence, even plaques and stuff like that. So sure, the body does its best, but yeah, anyway, I'm super fascinated that you brought that part up. And I really, really, really enjoyed talking with you today. Just
Me too,
so
you.
super lovely. And tell the audience how they can connect with you and learn about your work and your book.
Sure. If you Google Scott Stabile, you'll get to like Facebook and Instagram and my website, which is scottstabile.com. And I have a Substack newsletter with new writing. If you're interested in that, scottstabile.substack.com. The new book is Enough As You Are. You can find it where you find books. Hopefully, you can certainly find it online. And I want to say this too. My good buddy, David Gandelman, and I, David's a meditation teaching master. We're holding a retreat in Bali in May of 2024, a week-long retreat with breath work and meditation and some writing as a way to process and just getting deep and being in community and having fun and exploring that beautiful island. So come join us if you feel called to that.
That sounds so lovely.
It's gonna be. Bali's so special. It's such a beautiful place.
Oh, I haven't been there yet, but it's on my list of places to go when my son is a little older.
Yeah, sure. I get that. But Heather, This has been really lovely. I'm so happy to connect with you, truly. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much, Scott.
If you are embarking on a fertility journey and are ready to have your mind blown about what your body is really capable of and how it's impacted by the environment, then check out my book, The Ayurvedic Guide to Fertility. You can actually download the introduction to the book for free on my website at heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, Grzych.com. Read the intro for free and then buy the rest of this fertility enlightening book pretty much anywhere books are sold.
I get so excited. I get this kind of goosebump feeling when I get a booking from a new client that I haven't met yet. And I get so excited because I know that somebody has made a decision to go really, really, really deep into their healing. Because I know that Ayurveda is not a quote unquote normal thing that many people have access to, at least not in the United States where I live. So I know that when someone books with me, that they've really made a decision that they want to go deep into their healing. And so you could do that on my website at heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, Grzych.com. You can book me for either a Ayurvedic consultation if you're ready to dive in, or you can also book me for a 15-minute connection call if you're not sure where to go yet. I do have a couple offerings that are not on my website, and we could talk about that. So I look forward to meeting you.
Thank you for tuning in and dropping in with us today. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. I really want to hear your feedback. To learn more about my work, visit heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, Grzych.com. And meet me here next time on The Wisdom of the Body.